Hey everybody, it's Dean. Welcome to Bring Back Rock. Today we're talking to Corky Gunn from Sweet Pain, and I just once again thanks for taking the time to talk to us here.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
How does that get you a record deal before you even play a gig?
Well, the story goes like this. So I was working for Combat Records. The
Okay,
label started as a distributor. They started distributing European music, late 70s, importing stuff and selling it to stores in America. From that, they started doing P&D deals, press and distribution deals. They did with Metal Blade Records, Megaforce. They had the first couple Metallica records. And then they started putting out their own stuff. And they started getting a name for thrash because, on the indie scene, thrash was very big. I mean, Metallica started as an indie
right.
band. So they signed Megadeth and Exodus and Possessed and all these bands. So I, at the time, worked for the company, and the owner and I were very close. And he knew that I was hanging out with Ratt, Motley Crue, and all these bands. He knew I knew that scene. So he said, "Hey, we want to sign a glam band." So at the time,
Okay,
all those bands were signed: Ratt, Motley. There was
yep.
really no one left to sign. Guns N' Roses and Faster Pussycat hadn't arrived yet. New York had no bands, and if they did have any bands, they were kind of like, junked out, smacked out, Johnny Thunder's clone kind of bands. So they didn't want to deal with that. So he said to me, "You should just start a band." I'm like, "Well, I've never been in a band. What am I supposed to do?" He goes, "Well, you'll figure it out." So I said, okay. They were going to back it and put the money up to record and all this stuff. So they, you have to understand, they were distributing and pressing so many records that it was no big deal for them to press 5,000 copies of something. They had all the pressing plants were trying to get their business. It was not that big of a deal, and it was a low budget. So I was very good friends with Kelly Nichols, who later became the bass player in LA Guns. Kelly was a roadie at the time for a cover band in New York. And I said, "Hey, Combat's going to back us. Let's start a band." And he was like, "Cool." So that's kind of how it happened. And then we recorded, we got together, we got the rest of the members, wrote the songs, recorded everything, and got it out so quick. We did all of that before we even played a show. So it was just a matter of them, Combat, having a piece of that glam market as far as distributing vinyl to stores. It was just another thing to sell in a way. Um, and because they had the distribution really locked, they could get a copy, at least one, in pretty much every store. So that's kind of what happened. It was just, it was like very calculated and manufactured. And, we weren't great musicians or anything like that. I mean, I'm not a singer, really. I can't really sing. So what we became was a cross between Kiss and the Sex Pistols, which is not what was happening at that time. If you were into metal, you were either like in the Iron Maiden, Yngwie Malmsteen scene, or you were like Ratt and Motley Crue. And, I saw Motley Crue on Shout at the Devil a bunch of times. And I'm like, they never sounded good. So I'm like, I can do this. So that's kind of what happened,
That's
really.
amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, yeah. Kind of carte blanche right from the beginning to go do your thing. I saw that somebody mentioned you were like the first New York band to kind of get the Hanoi Rocks look down. Were they an influence like they were with everybody that seemed to come out of LA?
Yeah, I was into Hanoi Rocks way back. I mean, they had I don't know how many albums out at the time, but by the time Two Steps from the Move came out in '84, and I went to see Hanoi Rocks a couple times, and I was very influenced by them. So we took that kind of, I don't know, gypsy look, and ran with it. No one really looked like that at the time. There was no glam look.
I was going to
There,
ask, how are you accepted in New York with that attitude and that look compared to the other bands that were? Was it hard to get gigs, or were you accepted by everybody, or was it a struggle?
We got gigs pretty easily because of we were on Combat. So they would put, whatever, an ad in the local paper for us and that kind of stuff. So there was money behind it. So the club owners, they don't care. They just want people in the room. So
Right.
as long as we could bring people in, I mean, our second gig we ever did, we opened for Ace Frehley, who had just come out of retirement in 85, March of 85, I think was our second gig at L'Amour, the club L'Amour in Brooklyn, which is a famous metal club. And we got so much stuff thrown at us on stage. But I was a real, at the time I was, I'm a sober guy now, but at the time I was, doing drugs and drinking and like everybody else. And I was like throwing stuff back at people, like, ready to dive in the crowd and fight. And people were like, these guys are nuts. So it became like a car crash, like you can't look away kind of thing. And that was the attraction. By the time we really got rolling and shortly before the band ended, I mean, we were doing 2,000 people at L'Amour in Queens. There's a second L'Amour club in Queens. But yeah, we got a lot of crap. I mean, it was very much, think about Combat and Megadeth and all these bands. And that was when they would call you a poser. You're a poser,
Yeah.
But the difference is where most of those guys would be like afraid, I'd get right in their face and, I didn't care. I'd fight, what I'm saying? So would Kelly Nichols. He'd fight. So we were really not like Poison. Poison hadn't even come out yet, so we were like very New York, very street, and it was such a crazy mix and combination of things that it just, at the time, I don't think I've read books and reviews and things, and people like these guys were ahead of their time. And I feel we were, in a sense. So people didn't know what to make of us. And it was just like, what is this? And that's kind of, now it's appreciated. But back then, no one gave us easy time.
I was gonna say, when you listen to the album, you almost have more in common with the Sex Pistols than you do with Poison, but you look like Poison, so it was kind of an odd combination.
Yeah, odd combination. We looked like, and it was kind of like the early days of Twisted Sister when, Twisted
Right.
Sister, I saw them so many times in the clubs back in New York, but they had a tagline that they used: look like women, talk like men, and play like motherfuckers. That was their thing. So we were like looking like glammy, but with an attitude of we'll fight you and we're crazy and we don't sound like a real band. It was a crazy thing. It was just, I look back now and it's so long ago and I'm like, and I read these reviews like, these guys were ahead of their time. I'm like, I guess we were, in a sense.
It kind of sounded like it. You said you went to LA to mix the album, was that correct?
Yes, we recorded in New York in 2 days, in a little crappy studio in a garage. And I flew out to LA to mix the record, but with this guy, Randy Burns, who mixed all the thrash stuff on Combat. So they had Randy Burns on kind of like a retainer. So they're like, let Randy mix it, go out there. So I went out there, mixed it with Randy Burns in 2 days. But he was the thrash guy, so that was weird. The guy that produced the record, Eric Williams, is an African-American guy who worked at Relativity Combat Records. He was in a band called, I can't remember the name of his band, but he was in a band with a guy named Mark Linkus, who later went on to form that project Sparkle Horse, which is legendary. But it was just so, we had an African-American producer and the owner of the label's like, Eric should produce your record because he understands the New York Dolls. And that's how Eric got to produce us. But it was done in 2 days. So there wasn't much producing.
No, it's record and get it out.
We didn't have a lot of time with the songs to germinate and, think of melody lines and all this stuff. It was just like record, let's get it done, and that's kind of what happened. Richie Rano from Starz came in and produced the Subway Terror song, right, which is a Starz song, and he played on it and sang on it and stuff. So that was cool because I love Starz.
And that was just a random encounter when you met him?
I met him at a record store in New York. He at the time, Starz was way over and no one cared, even knew who Starz were, but he was doing a thing called the Hellcats a project called the Hellcats. And I ran into him at a record store and started talking to him. And I said, I want to do a Starz song. And he's like, cool, I'll help you. And that's how that happened.
Oh, wow.
And he actually came down and played a gig with us one night at Lemoore in Queens. He played a show with us, and Richie's a really good musician. And he got on stage with us, and it was like he didn't know what was going on. He was just like, this is my song. I wrote this song, and I can't even follow what these guys are doing. It was just hilarious. But he was a good sport, and it was a thrill for me to do anything with Richie Rano.
One of those cases where okay to meet your heroes.
Yeah, he was a nice guy. He was really cool with us, told us a lot of great stories about Kiss and all kinds of stuff. So it was just like, I mean, I saw Starz so many times as a teenager. So I'm like, this is amazing, Right. Yeah. And meeting your hero. It was awesome. He was great.
Yeah. Awesome. When you're in LA, did you check out the bands? Did you get involved in the scene at all there when you were hanging out in LA?
So I went out to LA in 84. I actually, I write about in my book, which we'll get into later. But I went to see some band at the country club. The name of the place was the Country Club in the Valley, and I see this guy running around, and he came up to me and he started talking about Sweet Pain. I know who you guys are, and he's like, I'm starting a band, and that was Tammy Down from Faster Pussycat. And he knew who we were. I don't know how, but I saw him. I went to the Rainbow, got thrown out of there, got in a fight, got thrown out of the Rainbow, barred from the Rainbow. It was just a crazy week out there. I don't even know. I stayed with some groupie girl that the label said, go stay with this girl. It's free. You don't have to have a hotel. And I was like, okay, whatever. It was just nutty. It was the 80s, man.
Right. It was a different time for sure. Absolutely. Now you only lasted a couple of years, right? Like 84 to 86.
Yeah. So the band formed in 84. We recorded late 84. Mixed it in 84, and the record came out in like the first quarter of 85, and then we started doing some shows. And then at one point Kelly Nichols quit. He went and joined a band called Angels in Vain, which got him out to LA, and then he ended up joining Faster Pussycat. Then he got in a motorcycle accident. They threw him out of the band, and then he ended up in LA Guns. The drummer also left shortly after that. And then I got two more guys in the band, and we did shows, Cleveland and Pittsburgh, and played around. And then it just started getting kind of like losing its steam. I couldn't take anymore because I was just, abusing alcohol and drugs, and I just ended it. And then I went back to work for Relativity.
Oh, so you went back to the record company and
yeah,
job was still there. That's good.
Oh yeah, Relativity. I mean, I became the director of promotions at Relativity in late 86 into 87. And I was the director of promotions, and that the big records then was we had released Joe Satriani, Surfing with the Alien, which was big. And we had a band called the Brandos, and all the college stuff like Robin Hitchcock and the Push Twangers and Scruffy the Cat and Thelonious Monster. And then they started doing hardcore bands like Circle Jerks and Cro-Mags, and but I went back to work for that label, and through there is going out to LA on business is how I reconnected with Kelly Nichols, and then I started working for LA Guns in 88.
I was going to ask, how did that come about, and when did it come about?
I was going out to LA every couple of months on business for Relativity and Combat, and I would go out and stay on Sunset at the Hyatt House, the Riot House, and Kelly would come because we've been friends for so long, and he would slowly. I met the other LA Guns guys, and they had no money. They would record. They recorded their album. Their manager paid their rent and all that stuff, but they had no pocket cash. So I'd come out there with a company credit card and take everybody out and strip clubs and restaurants. So they're like, by the end of 87, they called me up. They go, you need to be our road manager. I'm like, what? I've never been a road manager. They're like, dude, you take such good care of us. We want you on the road. So I left. I actually had been offered a job at Atlantic Records to run the heavy metal department.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't want to, I said, nah, I don't want to work for a record company again. I'm going to go on the road because I'd never done that. And, you know, they were on Polygram, LA Guns. So Polygram was huge, you know,
Right.
Cinderella, Bon Jovi, Def Leppard, Cinderella, you know, so Kiss. So it was just big time rock and roll. So I became their road manager. I went out there end of 87, flew out there, took a cab to their gig. They were opening for Guns N' Roses at Perkins Palace in Pasadena. And I started working for LA Guns. I was on the road with them for most of 88, cracked up and quit and came home.
So you weren't out there real long with them, but you must have seen some stuff, huh?
Yeah, that first tour was pretty crazy. You know, played all the clubs, of course, but they ended up opening for AC/DC and Iron Maiden and Def Leppard and all that stuff. So it was, you know, it was really stressful. Um, I was really I was very friendly with those guys. So, you know, and I didn't want to let Kelly down. So I went above and beyond, you know, I was sleeping 3 hours a night, if that. So, you know, you do that for 10 months, you know,
You're gonna burn out.
you're going to burn out. So, which is the thing with road managers, they just go through them like water. So I did 10 months with those guys and it was a lot of fun, but it really took a toll on me. I just couldn't take it anymore.
Well, I could see that. I could definitely see that. Well, what was it? Chris Holmes said you go on a year on the road, it'll take 10 years off your life. So
I've never heard that, but that's very true. Yes, it's you know, you don't sleep, you don't eat well, you're drinking beer, everybody's you know smoking weed, you know, and this girl, it's just insane. It's just every day is just you know who gets arrested, who you know who shoplifted, you know who left Denny's without paying the bill. You know, it never ends.
never ending headache for you and never ending party for the band, kind of.
Oh, yeah, the band now it's they don't care. The band is like, you know, you have to keep it together. You know, roadies being stupid, you know, just getting in trouble. It's like it's never ending. But it was, you know, pre-internet, pre-computer, pre-cell phone days. You know, you're out there with a rolls of quarters for the payphone. You know what I mean? It's like it was that, you know, but it was fun.
It does sound like a lot of fun. You mentioned in the bio that Joe Elliott was a fan of yours before you took the LA Guns job.
Well, that's a crazy story. We were I don't know, we were in New Jersey or somewhere, and you know, Phil Lewis, the singer in LA Guns, was in the band called Girl,
right?
With Phil Collen from Def Leppard. So Phil Collen ended up on the bus one night somewhere, and somehow Sweet Pain got mentioned. And he was started telling the story. He goes, "Oh, that crazy glam band." He's like, "We used to listen to that song, I Get My Kicks, before we would go on stage to psych us up." He goes, "That was the Beastie Boys before the Beastie Boys." And Kelly goes, "There's the singer right there." And he couldn't believe it. So I was like, wow, that's, you know, and he had no idea that I was in the band
right.
when he's telling the story. It was just so weird. Yeah, that was crazy. That story. I'm like, who'd have figured? But
right.
Kelly Nichols, God bless him, he hated that album cover of Sweet Pain. He hated the way he looked. He hated everything about it. So people would come to the LA Guns, you know, in-store record signings. Right. You know, they do in-store every city. They were doing in-stores. And people would bring the Sweet Pain record for him to sign. He'd be like, "I'm not signing that. Get that out of here." and it was just so funny. And people would go, "Oh, this is great." And he'd go, "Well, go talk to that guy. He was the singer." And it was just like that a lot. He hates that album cover to this day. He does. Yeah.
That's pretty funny. That is good.
He's very vain, you know, he wants to look a certain way. I get it.
And now you changed the album cover with the re-release, so you got to be happy.
Yeah, it's just, you know, that record was never on CD. It was on vinyl and cassette. So I have the master tapes of that because I was given the rights to it. So I remixed that record in the early 90s. I was, you know, going to put it out somehow. So what we did now with this re-release was it's the original album. The cassette of the album back in 85 had an extra track. So that's on there. And then there's an unreleased version of Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting, the Elton John song. and I've got 4 live cuts and radio interviews. So we made this cool package, but I've been sitting on that since early mid 90s. And, people would go, yeah, I'm going to put it out. And it would never happen. And then somebody goes, you need to speak to Dave Tedder. And there you go. So that's how that came about. So if you've ever heard the Sweet Pain or have a copy, there's a lot of extra stuff on the CD.
Incentive to buy it, which is always nice. I hate when people incentive to buy it, which is always nice because you have a number of things on there. Sometimes they'll release one bonus track, and I feel like you're a fan of the band, you want to buy it for that one bonus track, but you got a bunch of stuff on there.
Yeah, there's crazy radio interviews. In those days you'd go do these metal shows, at 2 a.m. somewhere, and people are coked up. It's just like crazy jabbering on these interviews. It's just insane. So they're pretty funny. So I just put them on there just to have more stuff. But the 4 live tracks are from Lemoore East with Kelly Nichols and the drummer Ronnie Tad, original band. And that was taken from a cassette from the board. And I chose 4 songs and put that on there.
Very cool. You also mentioned that you did Ain't Got You by Aerosmith as a cover, which is one of my favorite songs off of that Live Like a Bootleg album.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we only had, how many songs did we have? Maybe 9 songs, original songs. So you're playing clubs and you need more stuff. So we did a lot of covers. We did I Ain't Got You, Aerosmith version. Right. We did Ain't That a Shame, Cheap Trick. We did Room Service by Kiss. We did Personality Crisis by the Dolls. And a lot of that stuff, in 85, the Dolls were not like the legendary Dolls that they are now. It was like, it hadn't gotten, the cycle hadn't come around again for the Dolls. So, and I Ain't Got You, people didn't know what that was. So, they thought it was an original song. Because, it was that Yardbirds, right? Originally.
Right.
Originally,
I think it was. I'm most familiar with the Aerosmith track, actually, but
yeah, I think I had Aerosmith covered it.
Right. I think I had the Yardbirds actually on an 8-track, I think, at some point.
That's cool.
I have 2 8-tracks left: Kiss, Rock and Roll Over, and Fair Warning by Van Halen.
Oh, that's great.
You can't play it anywhere, but it's I won't throw them out either, so I have them hanging around.
Yeah, 8-tracks had good. People don't realize this, but 8-tracks, because the tape was so fat, had incredible sound. Most people listen to 8-tracks in their car, but if you had an 8-track player in your home stereo, man, the sound was better than cassette.
And it was kind of cool because it continuously played, but you'd fade out in the middle of a song and it'd change tracks and fade back in, and it was just kind of it was a weird thing when you're listening to it, but it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I had the 8-tracks back in the day.
Now tell me about the book. I was unaware about the book. When did that come out?
Yeah, I released this book about a year ago, Tales from the Gutter. Over the pandemic, nobody did anything. You just sat around. So I wasn't working, and I started pulling out boxes of journals and diaries, and I had written short stories. So I started compiling it into this book. Basically, it's the story of my life in music. As a teenager, as a fan, and the concerts I attended, then how I became a nightclub DJ, and how I started working for the record distributor and Combat and LA Guns, and all the things that I've done in music. It's my memoir of my life in music from a fan's perspective and from somebody that worked in the business.
How cool was it going through all those boxes and bringing up old memories?
A lot of stuff, man. I have... I just used to, you'd write stuff on a napkin or whatever and throw it in the box, or I have like old tour itineraries from the LA Guns days with just stories or notes or this happened or that happened. So it was a lot of fun. I was pulling stuff out and going, oh man, I forgot about this. And, it's pretty cool to look back on it. But it took me a while to get it all together. I had written some short stories. There's a chapter in the book about Twisted Sister, which I'd written as a short story. And then, I spoke to some of my friends that we were young teenage rock fans together. One of my good friends, Bruno Ravel, who went on to be the founder of Danger Danger. Now he's got that band, The Defiance. And I spoke to
Just
people like that.
great. The
Yeah,
Defiance, those Defiant band, that's great, great band.
great band. I mean, Bruno's really talented. You know, his dad was in the New York Philharmonic, violin, first, whatever that is, the first tier
First chair,
violin.
yeah.
Yeah. So Bruno's got a great ear. And now he does mixing. I mean, he mixed I think he mixed or mastered, I can't remember, the new Ace Frehley record. He's got a studio at his house. But I talked to him, and me and him were we went to so many concerts together, Motley Crue, Ratt, I mean, you name it. We saw everybody back then. And he was my concert buddy. And I ended up living with him. We moved in together, and I moved into his apartment in the Sweet Pain days. He was actually, he played with Michael Bolton for a while, believe it or not, when Michael Bolton had a rock band.
Right, right. He had a couple of rock albums or AOR albums out.
Yeah, Everybody's Crazy.
Yep.
He played that tour for Bolton. He was in Talus for a while. So I moved in with Bruno in '85, and that was nuts. But it was just debauchery every night. It was fun, but
When you're young, you can recover from that.
well, yeah. I mean, even so, it would sometimes be, you'd be asleep for 2 days. It's like, you recovered, but it took you a while.
Right.
But it was a lot of fun, man. It was, I'm still here. I'm sober. I'm in good health. So I look back on it fondly. But there was people I know, friends that couldn't pull out of that, and never
Right.
made it, so it's a very, it seems like it was less dangerous, but at the same time, more dangerous. Like, I don't know how to describe it, because there was no accountability.
Right. Well, right.
But
I look at stuff that I did as a kid, and my kid's getting to that age. He's like 13, and he's gonna start doing a lot of the stupid stuff I did. It's kind of scary.
well,
Like,
at least
yeah, I did that, but you shouldn't do that.
yeah, I've got a 30-year-old son, so the most important thing you can do is they need to know that they can come to you with anything, and you're not going to freak out on them. And that's the best lesson I can give anybody with a kid. It's like, if they're afraid to come to you, that's not good. They need to
Right.
be able to come to you, and then you not freak out on them, and at least talk to them about it. But it's scary, man, having a kid.
It changes your whole life perspective very quickly.
for sure. It was a different time for me. I mean, he was born in '94, and by
Okay.
that time I was, married and just in a different. It wasn't glam rock days. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. Where can we find the book?
The book is on Amazon,
Okay.
hardcover, softcover, and Kindle. It's on Amazon globally. Tales from the Gutter and Other Rock and Roll Shenanigans. That's my real name there, Mike Corcione. So that's what you'll look up on Amazon. But it's talks about, like I said, the going to concerts with Bruno in the early days. My first concert I ever went to was I was living in Georgia for a while when my parents divorced, but I went to see Leonard Skinner in 1974. That was my first concert. And I mean, we saw Motley Crue so many times, and there's crazy chapter on Motley Crue, like the partying that went on, the insanity that went on.
Now I got to get the book. I got like a
Well,
stack of books I'm trying to catch up on. I'm like 20 pages from finishing one, then I got to pick the next one up because they're piling up.
I read a lot. I've got a lot of books. I'm always reading a couple books at the same time. But if you're into Motley Crue, there's a lot of Motley Crue stuff. I mean, Nikki bit me. I had to get a rabies shot. I was bleeding. It was like, it was just craziness. Those guys were like cartoons. It was like a cartoon.
I was going to say, that's just the id running wild. That's just no, like you said, no responsibility at all. Those are four guys out for themselves, kind of.
They were nuts. I mean, those guys were like, if somebody asked me what did Motley Crue bring to rock? I'm like, well, heavy metal was never died. You know, it was Judas Priest and the Scorpions and
Right.
all this stuff. So it wasn't like they brought back metal. What they brought back was like the Keith Moon kind of rock and roll, trash hotel rooms and be nuts.
The
And
insanity.
insanity. They were nutty guys. I mean, we didn't really hang with anybody but Nikki and Tommy mainly, and the other guys. You know, Vince didn't care about anything unless you were a girl, and Mick Mars was older and he was cool, but he didn't want to be around. And Nikki and Tommy were the nutty guys, and it was just, you know, once they knew you and you always had party favors with you, it was just like every show was like, you know, come on in, you know, that kind of thing. So it was nuts with those guys. They were pretty crazy. I hung a lot with the Ratt guys, mainly Robin Crosby and Bobby Blotzer. They were the party guys. The other guys in Ratt, you know, the bass player and Warren DeMartini, they were very chill. Piercy, same as Vince Neil. If you want a chick, you didn't get any FaceTime with him. And Crosby and Blotzer were the cocaine hounds and partying. And but see, I had all these connections from the record labels because I was a nightclub DJ working in nightclubs. There's a club on Long Island called Malibu at the time that held about 3,000 people. And Malibu they had all the hot new wavy bands, you know, U2, Ramones, B-52s, that kind of thing, Joan Jett. So all those bands played there, and I got to become a very big club DJ in New York. I was sending my playlist to all the radio stations. And so I had all these record company people, whatever you need, you know, tickets, backstage, whatever. So that's how it all started as far as meeting these bands. And then once you meet them and they know that you're cool or you've got some drugs or whatever, it was like, hey, you know, so you'll never see times like that again, man. It's like,
no, now with cell phones everywhere, you can't get away with anything anymore.
You can't get away with anything. But I tell you, I have an Instagram account called 1985 Road Dog. And on my Instagram is all my crazy pictures from those days. And I've got pictures of Motley Crue snorting coke. You know,
find my pencil. So what was it? 1985
Road Dog.
Road Dog. Okay, I'll have to look that up.
But they didn't care if you're taking pictures. They were like, oh yeah, take more pictures. You know,
right?
They you know, yeah, coke. You know, it was just like that was. They were the craziest band, and I was on the road with LA Guns. I've partied with a million bands. Those guys were nuts, and it was just, you know,
people in that scene have so many stories. Even if they didn't make it, if they're a band that didn't make it, they still have great stories and great memories, and it was definitely worth going through.
For sure. I mean, even if you were local, if you were like a big local band in, I don't know, you're in Cleveland or wherever, and you're a big local band, it's the same crap's going on. The difference is the girls might not be as hot and the drugs might not be as good, but it was going on.
Right.
So, you know, when you get to the level of Motley Crue in those days, the girls were hotter, the drugs were better, and that's the only difference, really. Yeah, I mean, you know, there was the 80s. It was crazy.
Yeah, it's something that'll never happen again. Just can't because of all the technology. No.
That's probably a good.
Probably. How about the album? Is that available again? I know it's sold out for a while.
The CD, Sweet Pain?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Dave just told me they sold through the first pressing, and they've got more. Actually, he just told me today that's actually shipped already. So they should have it soon. I think you go search Vanity Music Group and go to that website, Vanity Music Group, and then there's like a store on there. But it should be back in the next week or so. And Perfect. He told me they're pressing a vinyl, like a pink vinyl record.
Okay.
I don't know when that's coming, but it's supposedly in the works.
Awesome. Hey, but that was great talk. I really appreciate you taking the time and spending a half an hour with me.
Anytime, man. I appreciate your interest, and thank you again for having me on.
Oh, I appreciate it. Now, I'll send Dave my email so I can get those get some of those photos to drop into the interview too.
No problem. I'll send you whatever you need.
All right. Appreciate it very much. Hey, great to meet you. Thank you very much for your time.
Dude, be
All
well.
right.